Good morning, Steph.
Are you enjoying the clown show presently going on? This is the anniversary of January 2nd, or 6th. And it seems to me that they've achieved their goals of stopping the functioning of the United States government.
Yeah, I mean, what an embarrassment that, they can't even elect a leader. I mean, perhaps not surprising, there are not a lot of leaders in the Republican Party and certainly not in Congress, but, they're letting the clowns run the show, and I guess this is what we should expect.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. We've been talking for however long about is justice going to come for these members of Congress who are, it's not a shock that they're having yet another insurrection. These are the people that were involved in January 6th. I know you've probably heard this Ali Alexander stuff. Him threatening to release evidence that Marjorie Taylor Greene committed a crime and will get her expelled from Congress. I know as a prosecutor, you used to, when dirtbags go to jail, it's normally because other dirtbags. I know you have to check the veracity because he's a dirtbag. But what do you make of that, what he's talking about?
Yeah, I don't credit anything that character has to say. We'll wait to see what kind of evidence he produces. I know he said he's going to give it to the Georgia state authorities. At least I think if it lands in Fonnie Willis's hands, we can trust that it will be handled well, responsibly, competently, aggressively. So, but you know what? Let's see what he has to provide. But Steph, you asked the exact right question. Are these insurrectionists going to be sworn into Congress again? If you look at the 14th Amendment, and let's remember, who is it that loves them some strict construction and originalism when it comes to the Constitution? That would be the Republicans, right?
Yeah.
And it's all of about 30 words, because in the event they can elect a speaker, which will probably happen eventually, the next thing that will happen is members of Congress will be sworn in. But here's what the Constitution says. No person shall be a representative in Congress who, having previously taken an oath to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection. Steph, strictly construed and applied. That means the Constitution prohibits the insurrectionists from being sworn into Congress. So the question is, what are we going to do about it? What is our government? What will our elected officials do about it?
Yeah. Well, as many people have said, this is of Kevin McCarthy's own making. If he had stood by what he said on January 6th and ejected these members from Congress, we wouldn't be here today. So it's, you just said, don't you love how the party that tried to overturn the will of the American voters is standing on the House floor blathering on about how much the American people are in charge? Hypocrisy much?
Yeah.
This whole thing was predictable.
Yeah. And Kevin McCarthy has no principles. This is a naked power grab. And I do wonder how long he will sacrifice the Congress and the country to his own unbridled desire to grab, the reins of power in the House. Will he at some point say, look, whether I'm being held hostage or not by these 10 or 20 never Kevin types, at some point I have to step aside if it looks like I will not become Speaker and let somebody, who actually has a shot at being elected Speaker take over.
Yeah. Well, you also said, so Trump throws his weight behind McCarthy and McCarthy loses again. The Republican Party seems stubbornly unwilling to learn its lesson. This is a worldwide embarrassment, what's going on at this point. But, to your point, you said, how in hell do all of Donald Trump's criminal associates continue to hover above the law? Jack, will you please prod the rule of law into wakefulness already? And the breaking news this morning, I wanted to get your take, is Jack Smith apparently has given a signal into the investigation where his Donald Trump investigation is going by adding 2 specialists in public corruption cases to his staff. What does that say to you?
It tells me they're moving toward indictments. Now, I maintain that it has taken far too long. I had high hopes that Merrick Garland would go after this aggressively, but it kind of proves that he didn't, probably because he was too much judge and not enough prosecutor at the end of the day. So as frustrated as I am with the pace, and what really got me over the last 24 hours, Steph, is Donald Trump reviving his lies about Shea Moss and Ruby Freeman, the Georgia state election workers. He knows that these are lies. His own Department of Justice told him these are lies. And what did he just do? He revived those lies and put those women again in harm's way. And he's in a position to do it because DOJ has failed to charge him for his crimes. That is unforgivable.
Yeah. Well, and you also talked about, you said, I'm glad President Biden is awarding the Presidential Citizen Medals to Georgia election workers, Shay Moss and Ruby Freeman, but with Trump reviving his intentional lies and putting them back in harm's way. That's why you're saying you're so disgusted that DOJ's leadership has failed them. Glenn, are we coming up, this is 2 years ago, are we coming up on statute of limitations?
No, because typically the statute of limitations is 5 years from the date of the crime or crimes until the prosecutors must indict or run out of time. So we still have, the statute of limitations may not be an impediment, but the health of our democracy and the safety of people like Ruby and Shay Moss, that is really what we're coming up against.
You tweeted the newly released January 6th text by Hope Hicks that starts with, "We all look like domestic terrorists now," perfectly sums up not only Trump's culpability for the insurrection, but the priorities of Trump and his corrupt cabal. A lot of these, obviously goes to their sort of selfishness, and all they were concerned about was themselves on January 6th, but it does also go to his intent legally, correct?
It really does. And who knew Hope Hicks could be so compelling? Because in just a couple of text messages that were recently disclosed, she proved, one, that the folks in Trump's inner circle knew Donald Trump was responsible for the insurrection. Two, she said the only people who will have us as speakers in the future are the Proud Boys. So she virtually announced who Donald Trump's allies were in the insurrection, white supremacist groups, and three, Steph, and here's the kicker, while police officers were being attacked, while the Capitol was under siege, while our lawmakers were at risk, Hope Hicks was texting, "Oh my goodness, do you know this? What this is going to do to my future job prospects?" That shows that Trump and his inner circle were not in it to serve the public. They were in it to see how the public could serve them.
Yeah. And speaking of testimony, you said Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony shows how DOJ's refusal to indict Mark Meadows for contempt of Congress comes home to roost. Again, we talked, I guess, earlier in the week, right, about what Mark Meadows has been awfully quiet, and whether we're trying to decide, has he flipped, will he flip? Where are you on that? I mean, I know some people have given it. Did you give a time frame of by April? I think for the most of us lay people, we're like, why does it take so long?
Yeah, we kick around time frames a lot, and Steph, full disclosure, my predictions are probably wrong more often than they're right, because we're all kind of flying blind with respect to what's going on inside my old professional home, the Department of Justice. I think April is probably as good a guess as any, because we all have to recognize that once Jack Smith was appointed to take over these criminal investigations of Donald Trump, he needs to do some due diligence, right? He needs to get his arms around these investigations, figure out who should be charged and for what. So, if we don't see some, and I feel like we've been saying this for years now, right?
Yeah.
If we don't see charges by month X, we're in deep trouble. Here we are again. If we don't see them by April, I think we're in deep trouble. I do still believe we're going to see charges.
Yeah. The last breaking news I wanted to, is the newly released document created by a Michigan Republican Party conflicts with a certificate signed and submitted by Trump supporters claiming he won the state's 2020 election. The certificate asserts that all of Michigan's 16 electors proceeded to vote by ballot December 14th and cast all of their electoral votes for the former president, but a separate document prepared by state GOP officials said the electors had only participated in a ceremony pledging to cast their votes for Trump if given the chance. The Michigan GOP chair at the time, Laura Cox, said it was a ceremony, and I didn't want it to be misconstrued as something other than a ceremony. Is that a defense that they were having some fake ceremony? Isn't that like Carrie Lake saying she's the duly elected governor of Arizona? Like, what is that?
No, these are all, after you get caught, you try to clutch at whatever straws you can, making up bogus explanations and rationalizations. The fake elector certificates, which were signed virtually under the penalties of perjury and then put in the U.S. mail, snail mail, that's a 20-year offense because that's mail fraud. And that's just for openers, Steph. The evidence of Trump and company's crimes is so overwhelming that once we get our feet in the well of a court and argue to 12 people sitting in a jury box, it's going to be like shooting fish in a barrel. Take it from this old prosecutor. It's just getting us into the well of the court has been so dang difficult for reasons that I will never understand.
Yeah, well, as you always say, who's going to take the maiden legal voyage? And I still don't know whether you think espionage, Georgia, or January 6th is going to be first up.
Yeah, I think Fani Willis and Jack Smith are going to run a race sort of neck and neck until we see who is the first to drop an indictment. But Steph, as sure as I'm sitting here, an indictment will come. An indictment has to come if we care about the continued viability of our republic. Never mind the health of our republic, but the viability of our republic.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Captain America.